Well, let's say what's going on right now. It is day 15 roundabout. Yeah, exactly, day 15. That might be a little late for this. I'm kind of thinking maybe I should have done this last week. But I'm transferring to a secondary, which it will sit in for a short diacetyl rest of, I don't know, 2 days. And I hope I'm not doing it too late for that. Maybe somebody can chime in the comments, see what they have to say about it. So it's fermented at around 55 degrees, maybe less. I'd say 13 degrees Celsius is the common temperature that I got when I used my whatever you call it, thermometer. Thermometer, what am I saying? I don't know. But the sense peanut always in there, you know, it would raise up to about 14 degrees, and sometimes it'd do some odd things, like go down a couple of degrees afterwards. But I think it lagered at about the right temperature. And now it's time to let it be warm for a couple days. By warm, I mean about 65 Fahrenheit, right? So this is maybe 18 degrees Celsius. And then bring it down to really cold, like 3 to 5 degrees Celsius or 35 to 40 degrees Fahrenheit. And what I don't really get about that, you know, they call it lagering. Why not just put it in your keg and leave it a few weeks in the kegerator and call it conditioning? I mean, what's the difference? There must be a difference. And the only difference I can think of is that they say to, every time I read about it, they say to bring the temperature down about 1 or 2 degrees Celsius, I think they mean Celsius, per day. So maybe that's what they mean by lagering. You can't just stick it into a kegerator and have it just reduce the temperature all the way down in a few hours, but instead bring it down slowly for a couple of weeks. I don't know. So that's where I'm at now. Secondary, onto the diacetyl rest. And after that, it'll be time for the lagering. By the way, pronunciation of diacetyl. I see people pronouncing that different ways, like diacetyl. And I don't know. It just seems to me people should be consistent. You know, there's these torches called acetylene torches. I've never ever heard somebody call it an acetylene torch. They call it an acetylene torch, and I just think consistency is what matters here. Not really what the pronunciation is you use, just so long as you're consistent. If you call it an acetylene torch, then call it a diacetyl rest. And if you call it a diacetyl rest, then call it an acetylene torch, and have everybody looking at you funny because you're a weirdo. Alright, that's it. Until next time, I'm going to be putting just one of these frozen, wrapped around it every 12 hours. Just change that for a couple of days. That ought to keep it down in the 65 Fahrenheit range, or the 17, 18 degrees Celsius range. And then I'll have to bring it down using a bunch of cold pads. Now I better attend to this thing before it starts bubbling. One more thing. Seems like there's always just one more thing. That was a very, very, very sanitized jar. First I washed it with antibacterial soap, and then I poured about 1 liter of boiling water through it very slowly, and then I star sanded the heck out of it. And then I filled it as much as I could with the trub, so that I would have yeast for the next time. So yeah, it's pretty sanitary, except for my hands, right? My hands got all in the trub as I was trying to scoop it out. And I don't know, need to start using gloves, get some rubber gloves, latex or something from the paint department at Home Depot or wherever. So, I think what I'm going to have to do is make a starter out of it the next time I decide to use it. That way I can taste the starter, make sure everything's okay. And that's a good savings of money, considering this thing took 2 packets of dry yeast in order to get enough cells to properly brew the stuff. That is going to be my very last point for tonight. The date today is, it says Thursday, August 31st, but that's because it's just after midnight. Well, 2:18 a.m. Let's take a look at the peanut. It says 19.8 C right now. This is the last 24 hours. The reason why the temperature is up high right here is because I took it out and kegged it and bottled it. I think I only got about 4 gallons in the keg, and that's because I just was expecting that there was 6 gallons in there for some reason, and I filled up a bunch of bottles first, and maybe I shouldn't have done that. But you can look at these numbers on these last 24 hours. That's kind of high. That's what it got up to. But, you know, it starts out way back here. It's in the low 12s. But if you look at my average over the last month, this was like day 3 or something right here. 13.4. Here's the diacetyl rest period. Then it got down to, in one day, down to 12.2. One thing I noticed is that, as you can see right here, it went up and then back down. And the reason why is because I turned on the air conditioner right here and the temperature in the house went down. So what I've learned is that the peanut is very much affected by, even though it's on the inside wall of my fermenting chamber, it's very affected by the outside temperature. So I don't know what temperature the beer was. In fact, every time I would point my thermal, I don't know what it's called. Why do I keep calling it that? But the thing with the laser pointer that takes temperature, you just point it at it. It always said 13 to 14 degrees, somewhere in there. And I just assumed I wasn't getting it down, the temperature down. But then, when I kegged it tonight, there's always that little bit, there's like a ½ inch left in the bottom that had been left there for about a half an hour while I went and did some cleaning. And then I checked the temperature on it, and it was 10 degrees. So in that half an hour, it raised up to 10 degrees. I don't know what temperature I ever got it down to, but right now it's in the kegerator, where it's going to be chilled way down. I'm not sure if I'm going to drink it now or an ale that I just barely started. And here we are at the very last clip of the Sense Peanut videos. This is the beer I made. I'm sure you can't tell from there, but it's looking pretty clear. It's really clear, which you'd expect it to be. Spent about 3 weeks in the lagering chamber, followed by about a week in the keg before I carbonated it. Then I carbonated it overnight. And I'll tell you this about the Sense Peanut. I think it works really well. My lagering chamber, on the other hand, I just don't know. Because it seemed like the temperature was never getting down, according to the Sense Peanut, which was stuck on the outside of the, well, on the inside wall of the lagering chamber. It just was never getting really down very far in temperature. And whenever I would use my infrared thermometer aimed down at the top into the fermenting chamber, you know, it was always 13, 14 degrees, I think. And I just assumed it was never getting down below that. But there was a point when I kegged the beer that I had left just a little inch in the bottom of the fermenter. And I tested with the infrared thermometer maybe a half an hour later. It was just sitting there in the fermenter, and it was 10 degrees. So it had to have warmed up quite a bit over that half an hour, that 1 inch. I mean, think how warm your beer gets when you're drinking it. If you don't drink it, it just sits there. So it had to be much less than 10 degrees. I don't know what temperature it went down to. So if I do this again in the same way, I'll take the Sense Peanut thermometer and attach it to the outside, somewhere around the middle of the fermenting vessel. Maybe put some bubble wrap around it or something, and go from there. And I think it'll work a lot better that way. It didn't really occur to me to stick it on there before, because I was thinking of the sort of tape that's on it that you use to stick it onto something, and it's fairly permanent, and now I have to scrape it off of there somehow. But let's go to the beer. I have to say, I'm not terribly impressed. I do kind of have the idea that I got a fairly different flavor out of it, because it's lagered, not, it's lagered yeast, and it was lagered, and it's not ale. It tastes thinner. In terms of carbonation, I guess it's over-carbonated, because when I fill up the glass fills up completely with foam, right? And on the other hand, like I said, it tastes thinner, it tastes flat even, to some degree. I'm not impressed with it. It's also possible that it's due to a terrible mistake I made that I haven't mentioned yet. And that is when I transferred to the secondary. Well, I buy vinegar from Costco. And of course, Costco, they always sell you more than you need, right? So you get 2 jugs of vinegar, 2 1-gallon jugs. And these are the things that I buy all the time. And I use a lot of vinegar. It's my first wash in my dishwasher, because I have hard water. And so, I've got a 2-cycle dishwasher. It washes once and then it washes again. Well, I use vinegar as the first detergent when I wash in my dishwasher. And that way it always dissolves away any hard water deposits that may have been left from the previous washing. So I always have a lot of these jugs around, and one of these jugs I have made into my Star San jug. And it just so happened that I had one of these jugs of vinegar sitting next to my Star San jug. And the next day after kegging, after moving the beer to the secondary, I happened to notice that in my transferring area, where I transfer from one fermenter to the other, there was my jug of vinegar. I thought, what on earth is that jug of vinegar doing down here? And I had to go back in my mind and figure out what was going on. And it occurred to me, and I realized that when I had made more Star San, I had picked up the jug of vinegar, which had maybe 3 or 4 inches in it, of vinegar, and I was thinking, oh, that's not enough Star San. I had the wrong jug. And I put a teaspoon of Star San in it and filled it up with water. Now, the thing is about Star San is it's pretty much just phosphoric acid, right? It's like Coca-Cola without the flavoring and without the sugars. It's just an acid. Well, that's what vinegar is too, acetic acid. So it turns out that I sanitized everything with a mixture of vinegar, white vinegar, and Star San. And I have to wonder, did that have some effect on why this came out so thin? I personally think it made no difference whatsoever. If I died and it turned out there was a God, and the God was going to decide whether I had to go to hell or heaven, and he stood outside and said, you know what, you're on the cusp. I'm going to make a deal with you. You guess. You tell me what you think. Did the sanitizing with vinegar make any difference to your beer whatsoever? And if you get the answer right, you go to heaven. If you get the answer wrong, you go to hell. Well, I would say it made no difference whatsoever, because that's what I think is most likely. In any case, I don't have a lot of motivation to continue making lagers. I really like how clear they are. But I think that's just a matter of time, right? Spent an extra month after 2 weeks of fermentation. I spent an extra month settling out. You can do that with ales. Is there anything else to add here? Do you know, I don't think there is. So, With that, I'm going to end this video. I hope it was nice and short. I have to go back and find all the previous clips, which I don't think there are very many, and piece them together and get this thing uploaded. Cheers!